Welcome to the RETSI podcast. Today we have an exciting episode for you. Michael O'Connor, lead counsel for SRP, is in the hot seat answering all the questions about water, the future of water, and power in Arizona. As we all know, a lot of people moving to Arizona have the misconception that we have a low water supply in Arizona. So Michael debunks that for you and also talks about with all these data centers going in, the power supply. It's going to be a great episode, and I'm excited for you to tune in for it.
They've read the same articles in the New York Times with respect to what happened with respect to in the tiny little area, in terms of the foothills. It was totally blown out of proportion. It was somehow suggested that not only Scottsdale, but the state of Arizona was running out of water because there was this tiny little area that was outside of service territory that wasn't going to get some water. The short answer is that, as I've said before, this state has always done a phenomenal job with respect to the current growth and anticipating future growth. We are in good position with respect to the balance of supplies that we have, and that there shouldn't be any concern with respect to people moving into this area with respect to residential or smaller growth.
Welcome to the RETSI podcast. Today, Chris and I are sitting down with Michael O'Connor. Michael, thank you for joining us.
You're quite welcome. Look forward to it.
Appreciate you. And I'd like to start with an introduction background on yourself.
Sure. So I'm currently at SRP, and my title is the Chief Legal Executive. In that role, I have control over the legal department, the land department, security, some of HR, and then all our subsidiaries. And I've been there since 2011.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like you don't have anything going on.
There's a few issues in power and water right now that we're going to talk about here during this podcast. So yes, quite a bit going on.
We appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to share with us and the audience.
Great. Look forward to it. I think it's an important topic that not only your audience, but most of Arizona really should be watching out for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dive in. Could you kind of give us a state of the union when it comes to Arizona water supplies?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I think the way to think about Arizona water supplies is first and foremost, what are those supplies and where they come from? And if you think about it from the standpoint, we're in pretty good shape today in 2025 and 2026. And the question is going to be, as we go in the future, how challenging that's going to be and how we're going to meet those challenges. So with respect to Arizona, there's really 4 different areas that we get water from. The first, obviously, is our groundwater, where we pump below the water. The second is the Colorado River, which I think we'll spend a little time here talking about today. The third is the SRP River System, which are the Salt and Verde Rivers in northeastern Arizona. And then the last is reclaimed water in terms of reused water that we do. So those are kind of the 4 buckets that we use for the state as a whole in varying degrees.
Do those buckets kind of like change over time where we're getting a majority from one over the other and it's just managing that?
Yes, they have changed over time. Obviously, from the standpoint, when we first became a state, we only had groundwater.
Yeah.
And then obviously we developed the SRP system. And then in the 80s, we ultimately were able to get the Colorado River system when the CAP was built and brought down through central Arizona all the way down to Tucson. And then obviously reclaimed water is much more of a more recent phenomenon in terms of us being able to purify water to the point that we can reuse it in the system. So currently, if you're thinking about a kind of a pie chart in terms of what's what, currently, I think the latest statistics really in the 2021 timeframe that from the Department of Water Resources is about 40% groundwater, about 33% in terms of the Colorado River, and then you have about 18 to 20% the river system, and then the rest reclaimed water. Now, since that time, as we'll talk about some more, the Colorado River has been a little bit strained. So the state of Arizona's allocation, we've actually voluntarily reduced some of that. So to your point, yes, those changes a little bit, and you're going to see that the Colorado River supplies have been a little bit reduced. Reclaimed water has been increased as our cities have become much more technologically advanced in terms of our system and purification systems.
Yeah, I was sharing with you before we started recording. We had Jennifer Brown from Central Arizona Project a few years ago speak to the brokerage, and she said a stat, and it blew my mind, and I'll probably totally butcher it, but we use less water now in that year was 2022, 2023. When did we have her out?
That was right after that like, there's like a Wall Street Journal like hit piece on like Arizona and not having enough water. And it was just like every call we had from clients coming in from town were just like, I want to move to Arizona, but I heard you guys are going to run out of water. It was the farthest thing from the truth. And so we brought her in to speak with the agents and get to the bottom of the article. And maybe we can hit a little bit on that too.
Well, sure. And she's a great source at CAP. Yeah. And I think probably what we're referring to is really one of the great successes of the state of Arizona. So yeah, there's some really great statistics in terms of the 1950s, the amount of water we're using. So if you go from the 1950s up until like 2022, it's the same amount of water that the state uses, despite the phenomenal growth we've had with respect to residential, the phenomenal industry that we've had, and just the growth as a whole.
Yeah.
And that's been done in part because we've basically transitioned from some agricultural lands to more urban, less that way. And we've had some really foresight people in terms of the Groundwater Management Act, conservation issues. So we've actually been in the forefront with respect to conservation over the years.
Yeah. That stat just blew my mind when I heard it. And
it's a slide that we use quite a bit.
Yeah.
When we're out there talking to the public, et cetera.
And to your point, like when you think of the growth that we've had in the valley, I mean, it's insane to think that that's...
Well, I mean, and it makes sense. I mean, you look at how big those fields are and how they have to flood them and this and that. And I mean, that area isn't really like for replenishing aquifer. I mean, aquifers in the ground, right? I mean, that's more or less like the use of the water. And if there's less farmlands using the water, more urban areas, I could see how that kind of balances out. But I mean, you have a graph that we need to make sure we put up. But
yeah, I'll be happy to send you the graph in terms of showing that.
Yeah, Jack, we'll have him edit that in so people can see that. But it's pretty outstanding when you think about it.
Yeah, and if you think about it in terms of agriculture, you know, back in the 50s, they were using quite a bit of flood irrigation with respect to that. And that did help the aquifer a little bit because it would seep in and then continue to seep down. Agricultural technology has increased quite a bit since that time. You have a lot more drip irrigation, much more efficient use of water. So even though agricultural still uses more on a per acre basis than residential or urban, they become much more efficient since that time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I have one of those irrigated lots where, you know, it's like it
so you're an SRP customer then.
I'm an SRP customer.
Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah, but I remember I had Eileen Rivera and Lisa Doyle were in town from California, and like in Long Beach, they're just eliminating anything that utilizes water whatsoever, right? And they had to remove all their grass and cut down a couple trees and change everything for low water use. And I remember them pulling up to my house and walking up to the front door. My whole entire front yard is irrigated, and they're just like losing their minds. And I'm like, I think we're replenishing the aquifers. It's been this way forever, and flood irrigation is just how we water our trees and plants in front yards in our neighborhood. And they were just blown away.
Yeah.
And
I remember that. Well, I mean, obviously the Colorado River allocation has been in the news, and I think it's timely to have you on and kind of get some perspective around that.
Sure. Well, let me give you a little background with respect to that, and we can obviously follow up with a lot of questions.
Yeah.
You know, if you start from the proposition that the Colorado River, for those who have been following it all, there's really 7 states that share the Colorado River in terms of its allocation, and then, of course, the Mexico itself.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, you have the upper basin states above Lake Powell and Lake Mead. So you've got Colorado, you've got Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico. Those are the 4 upper basin states. You have the lower basin states, which are California, Arizona, and Nevada. So when the Colorado was originally, for lack of a better term, divided up between the upper and the lower basin states, it was in the 1920s, and quite frankly, at that time, the river actually was producing a lot of water, a little more wet period historically than it otherwise been. And there was a belief in an allocation based on about 15 million acre feet. So the upper basin would get 7.5 million feet, lower basin would get 7.5 million feet as well, and then obviously Mexico later on would get some. As we're in today's world, the river, because of some drought issues over the last 25 years, is not producing 15 million acre feet. there's really more of a structural deficit. So it's really in the 11, 12 million acre feet per year. And so that's one of the reasons, if you think about it, why you see Lake Mead and Lake Powell going down, because the water is just not being produced as much.
Yeah.
So the last time that the Colorado River, in terms of Lake Mead and Lake Powell, were full was in the year 2000.
Yep.
And, currently, so if you looked at kind of various charts, you'd see full Lake Mead and Lake Powell back in 2000. And then since that time, because of a 25-year drought, which historically is incredibly lengthy for this area, the system now is closer to 30% full as opposed to 100% full. And so therefore, we're running into a situation in terms of it's not producing much water. And so you have the 7 basin states are now in discussions in terms of how to allocate the shortages because it doesn't produce as much as you otherwise would. That's what we're really talking about. That's what's in the news these days with respect to that. And in particular, there were agreements between the 7 basin states in 2007 that were in place for 20 years. Okay, it's 2026 now. Those agreements are going to expire. So if you think about it, where we are today and what people are reading about is you have real challenging hydrology because, number one, you don't have as much water coming off. And right now we don't have a lot of snowpack, so we don't anticipate much this spring. No. You have all the legal agreements between the 7 basin states expiring, so they're talking about it. And of course, we're in an election year. So there's a lot going on.
When are those expiring? I know you'd say that.
So it's to the end, there's a 2007 sharing agreement with respect to shortages on the agreement on the river. That expires in the end of December 2026. So the 7 basin states have been negotiating over the last 4 or 5 years to see if they can come up with a new agreement starting January 1, 2027. If they can't come up to an agreement, the Department of Interior will issue what they believe the alternatives are. And then, who knows, I hope we don't all go to court, but that's the alternative.
That would make you very busy.
It would make us all very busy and something to watch for. Yeah. Unfortunately, the lawyers will do real well. I don't know how everyone else will under that scenario. So the deadlines with respect to that, and particularly it's great to be on the show today from the standpoint, the Department of Interior has given the 7 basin states until February 14th to come up to a voluntary deal. So that's only 2 weeks away.
2 weeks away.
Yes.
Wow.
So, and if they are unable to come up to a mutually agreeable, that's when the Department of Interior will issue what it wants to do as of January 1, 2027. So we're at that point right now.
Has there been any progress made between the basin states?
So there's been some progress, not enough. Obviously, our hope would be that the states all get together before the 14th. There have been various efforts by the Department of Interior, including the Secretary of the Interior himself, to call the 7 governors back to try to hammer out a deal. But we're talking about, obviously, large amounts of water that need to be reduced, and people don't like giving up water rights.
Yep.
And of course, we also have elections coming up this year. So we have 7 basin states. 6 of those 7 states are having gubernatorial elections as well. So you need to understand that plays as well with respect to where things are going.
So you're mixing politics with a deadline, with water and rights.
What could happen?
Sounds like Netflix series.
Yeah.
It could be.
Taylor
Sheridan needs to get on that one, huh?
So I think, for your listeners, I think it's incredibly important that they watch what's going on. I think it's important, obviously, for the region, it's for the state. It's important for the greater Phoenix area in terms of how we're going to grow. And as I said, we've met every challenge historically. It's going to be another challenge that's going to require everyone to work together, understand the issues, to be able to meet those goals.
Yeah. Well, and we've done such a good job of it historically.
As I said, this state has always risen up to the occasion in terms of meeting those issues and goals and solving. Little challenging right now, but hopefully we'll do the same. We got a lot of people working on it.
So, jumping a little bit more, because this is more of a real estate podcast, and if I'm a real estate agent and I have somebody that calls me that's moving from California or moving from Cook County, I've had that call several times, and they're like, hey, I read this article that Arizona's running out of water. if you're a real estate agent, what do you tell your client based on everything that you know and our supplies and our reserves and everything?
So my first disclaimer is I'm not a real estate agent.
Okay.
But let me tell you how at least I talk to my friends who call. Because they've read the same articles in the New York Times with respect to what happened with respect to in the tiny little area, in terms of the foothills. It was totally blown out of proportion. It was somehow suggested that not only Scottsdale, but the state of Arizona was running out of water because there was this tiny little area that was outside of service territory that wasn't going to get some water. The short answer is that, as I've said before, this state has always done a phenomenal job with respect to the current growth and anticipating future growth. We are in good position with respect to the balance of supplies that we have, and that there shouldn't be any concern with respect to people moving into this area with respect to residential or smaller growth. The bigger questions become when you get into data centers, we can talk about in farming, but I think the short message is we are in good shape. We have a lot of really smart people working on this to make sure we're going to stay in good shape for the future.
How many years of reserve do you think we would have right now built up if, say, things didn't go the way we wanted to by the February 14th deadline?
So we're going to be optimistic and hope that we're going to be able to get some type of compromise going forward. But we always plan for the system going forward. We actually have quite a bit of water currently reserved underground with respect to going forward. We have quite a bit of supplies with respect to our groundwater to the extent we use it wisely and do some more conservation. And I think that we're still going to be fine one way or the other with respect to how things end up on the Colorado.
Yeah. Well, they talk about 100-year water supplies. I mean, that's a real thing?
Yes, it is a real thing with respect to that. And, obviously, I think as you all know, with respect to getting certificates, you have to get the 100-year water supply from Department of Water Resources. They're very strict with respect to that. And we've been able to meet that with respect to the credits that we have and the supplies that we've been building. In addition, there's some additional projects that SRP is working on with CAP and others to be able to store more water. So we are raising Bartlett Dam, which will be able to water. We're also developing an interconnection system between SRP and CAP so we can trade water back and forth. And then, as you know, the state also set up called the Water Infrastructure. So it's WIFA, and they're looking for augmentation of supplies. So even if there are some issues with the Colorado River, WIFA is out there with support of the legislature and the governor looking at augmentation. What does that mean? Desalination, for example, would be one of the things. Creative suggestions with respect to enhancing some desalination that California is also doing, trading some of those supplies. So we would have them increase their desal over in California, decrease their Colorado supply. We've talked about whether it makes sense to build a desal plant in Mexico. Obviously, there's some challenges with respect to doing that, but everything is on the table in terms of how we actually potentially augment supplies as well. So a lot of people working to make sure that our economy continues to grow here.
I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name, but I was at a Forbes event in Maui, and he was talking about a company called, Planet Labs was different, but they were talking about a company that was exponentially excelling in desalination and the cost to do it and the ability to do it and to create abundance, essentially. Are you guys seeing desalination as something that's accelerating and improving, or is that kind of like a plan B or C or D?
So it is very much improving with respect to that over the years. The challenge still is it's an expensive supply of water because particularly from the standpoint, if you think about it, number one, if you're going to have to build a desal plant, you have that expense. You have the power required to go through all that, which is incredibly expensive. And then the third is you've got to move that water to where it's needed. So think about that in terms of Mexico. You have the Gulf of Mexico. Sounds like it's a great place to build a desal plant. That's fine. But then you've got to, number one, build that plant, and then you've got to move that water uphill, which is not cheap, and even cheaper if you more expensive if you put it in a pipe. So we're looking at all those ways to do it. There's also currently a desal plant in Yuma that hasn't been operating for a very, very long time. We're looking at potentially restarting that desal plant in Yuma.
Oh, wow. So it's already built and they just decommissioned it because they didn't need it.
It didn't need it, and it was very, very expensive to run back when it was built.
Yeah.
So as I said, there's a lot of different ways that people are talking about, as I'll say, the augmentation issue. And desal obviously could be a play with respect to that.
Yeah.
Sorry to circle back, but I wanted to go back to Lake Powell because like our family,
we love
Lake Powell. And from 95 to 2020, we went every year as a family vacation. And it's funny to think of 2000 being the last year it's full because I know there's pictures of Chris and I underneath the Rainbow Bridge on a boat where the water is all the way up underneath the Rainbow Bridge. Last time I was there in 2020, it was a 1.5 mile hike to get up to see Rainbow Bridge.
You didn't come. Rock.
Yeah, you didn't come with us on that trip in 2020, but it was a 1.5 mile hike. And I know
just
like when
water.
And I know when we were kids, there's pictures of us like on the dock, on the boat, Rainbow Bridge in the background with water, all the way underneath it. And so that definitely hit home.
Well, Lake Powell, currently to your point, so if you go back to 2000, it was full, 100%.
Yeah.
I just have a chart here in front of me that I'll be happy to share with you all at the end of December of 2025, just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
It was 28% full.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a huge drop over that 25 years. As I said, we fortunately have pretty good records with respect to the historical records of droughts over the years. And as you know, weather changes over time, but 25 years for a drought period is considered extremely long given the historical record, for this area. And the hope would be that we're coming towards the end of whatever period this is, and we can go back into a wet period.
Yeah. It comes in cycles.
It does come in cycles. Obviously, there are some changes in the weather pattern that, we could talk about for a long time as well, but our hope is that we're coming towards the end of this cycle. I can't predict exactly when it's going to be, other than to predict it's going to end at some point, and hopefully we'll turn back into a wet period.
Yeah. Does it all really kind of starts with that snowpack in Colorado, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So if you think about it in terms of the upper basin, Colorado, if you will, and the lower basin states, all the water really is generated off the Colorado system in the upper basin.
Yeah.
And it's used much more so in the lower basin in terms of obviously the populations, the cities, and obviously agricultural as well.
Yeah. Well, you look at it this year, just to put it in perspective, I have 3 or 4 friends that canceled ski trips because of the lack of snow in the basin.
Correct.
Then on the other hand, like Truckee got 60 inches in a weekend. It's kind of so weird where it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and you take these snapshots, and it's really hard to figure out where it's going, from the standpoint. But clearly, over the last few years, the weather pattern as far as snow has moved a little further north. So the Rockies that we normally would be full, that pattern's going a little bit further north than it historically has been. And so you get up near Truckee and Lake Tahoe and those areas, or further north, they've received a lot of snow. But unfortunately, the Colorado system has not received as much as they historically have. Yeah.
So it's going to be a dry year.
Yeah, as I said, we're right around 60%, I think, right now in terms of the snow melt up in the Colorado area, and it's kind of late in the year. My hope, to be optimistic, is you go back a few years in 2022 or 23, and we were about at this level, and then we had some really, really big spring storms.
Yeah.
So not that I'm hoping for huge spring storms, but that would be great for our water system with respect to that.
Yeah. I think another talking point and we'd love insight on is the data centers. You know, we've become the new it's the new Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley here.
Yeah.
Correct.
We're producing the TSMC center. that's a spectacular project. It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and with that comes concerns around data, power and water.
Correct.
For these different projects. So I'd love to just kind of pick your brain on insights and kind of how you view those.
Sure. So it's really an exciting time to some extent in terms of economic development in the state, because you do have Silicon Desert that we hear from time. So you've got a huge project, obviously, with respect to TSMC. Huge for the state of Arizona in terms of them coming in with respect to the chip building that they're doing. So in addition to the chip manufacturers there, and hopefully Intel's renaissance a little bit, you also have the data centers. So kind of two different things. Mm-hmm. So in terms of from a power standpoint, both those industries, the chip manufacturing and the data centers, historically have used phenomenal amounts of power. And I think are going to continue to use amount of power. And we've been able to meet those loads so far from an electrical standpoint. And I think that's just going to continue, which is why you're going to see a lot more transmission lines and stuff go out in the system. On the water side, those industries have historically used a lot of water. They've become much more efficient. I think TSMC, some of the others are using now a lot more reclaimed water, closed loop systems. And so they've dramatically reduced their water use. On the data system side, they were huge, voracious users of water for a long time.
Yeah.
They also are dramatically reducing their use because they understand the challenges in terms of supplies and also the political pushback, with respect to using too much water. Mm-hmm. Many of them now are even going to air-cooled systems to reduce it as much as possible.
Yeah.
But you're going to continue to see growth in the data center. I mean, that's obviously where our economy is going. There's just so much being created and data centers are going to be built. Arizona is a great place for data centers because we don't have natural disasters. We don't have floods, we don't have hurricanes, et cetera. So it's a great place with respect to have some place that has reliable water and power without all the disasters, if you will, that could come.
No. Oh, for sure.
So I think when you hear about that, though, in terms of the response, for particularly your audience, I think both the water community and the power community are meeting those loads. Not only for today, but we're looking out generations to make sure we continue to be able to meet that load and also meet all the other growth that we still want to be able to have in the state of Arizona.
Yeah.
So next time I get a call and somebody's doubting our water supply, I'm just going to forward them a link to this podcast and just say, hey, here's an understanding you need to... Your kids don't have to worry about water supply in Arizona.
You can do that, and you can also link my email address to them, and I'd be happy to talk to them.
With respect to clients, trust me, I wouldn't be doing you a favor there.
Okay, only the really nice ones. No, but there's a lot of, as I said, some really good work going on with respect to that, and people are really trying to be thoughtful, not only solving it for today, but in the future as well. Yeah. Because there is that balance, as you know, with respect to growth. Yeah. And that's what we're here and trying to do.
Well, and it's in the data center's best interest to be efficient, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's going to reduce their overhead, reduce their cost.
Well, and we were looking at, Jason was sharing a project with me. We have a family member who owns a BIM modeling company. So they do the models of the piping and kind of fix what the engineers didn't first see, like on paper and on CAD. And looking at some of these chiller centers for just the water, they're like city blocks in size, and the engineering going into it's insane. And plus, the politics behind the fact that they're recycling their water, I think, is huge. And a lot of people don't take that into account. So.
Yeah. Well, you've seen that play out probably in Tucson, with respect to Project Blue, if you've been following the news at all.
There was about that one.
It was a huge data center that was going to be first within the Tucson city limits. It got voted down by the Tucson City Council. Then they moved slightly outside the city limits. Now it's a big battle with respect to what's going on in the Corporation Commission, also at the county level, largely focused on too much water and too much power. And so the utilities down there and also the data center have been trying to put out that information with respect to here's how we're reducing things and here's how we're really going to reduce as much as water. But politically, it's a tough issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget the podcast I was listening to. They were talking about with the production of data center and the production of chips, they're not worried about water. They're worried about power.
Yes.
Like we're not going to have enough power to power these AI data centers and how they're exponentially growing and these new chips that are coming. That said, it's like we've seen some data centers come to Arizona. So what's our biggest supply of power? Is it still Palo Verde?
So like water, we have a varied supply with respect to power. So you've obviously got nuclear with Palo Verde. You've got natural gas turbines with respect to plants, and this is both for SRP and APS. You also have still some coal facilities up in the Northeast. You obviously have hydropower from some of our dam systems, and then you'll have the renewables, in terms of a lot of utility scale solar, as also batteries. So with respect to the data centers, it's not a situation that we can't meet the load, it's the timing of being able to meet it. And what I mean by that from the standpoint, if you look at our system, just to give you some rough numbers, our capacity last year was a little about 8,500 gigawatts, or megawatts, excuse me, so 8.5 gigawatts. The people wanting to come in for data centers, essentially we could double that size within 10 years. So think about that. It's taken us 100 years to get to where we are, and they want us to double that within the next 10 years. So the question is, we will have the power, it's just building it in terms of whether it's a small modular nuclear reactor, expanding some gas facilities, putting more utility scale solar out there. It's a timing issue to get that done in transmission to be able to get it to those loads. So it's just happening so fast in terms of building and keeping up with that.
Do you know, is there any plans in the future, and maybe you can't talk about this, but doing more subsidies for like at-home battery systems? I know for a while there was one that my next door neighbor actually recommended to me when we were adding onto our garage and upgrading our 200 amp to a 400 amp. And I think the storage of power could play a huge dynamic in power supply in Phoenix and all that stuff. And not relying on one major center to store power, if you have multiples within a neighborhood. But
yeah, so both SRP and APS have had over the years, and will probably continue to have, different incentive programs with respect to battery power to be able to store.
Powerwall, basically.
Yeah. We've done that for a while. And those have been fairly popular, and so they'll continue in various forms. And those are great in terms of reducing some of the load. The challenge is, in terms of particularly with the data centers and the chip manufacturers, they need power 24/7.
Yeah, there's no.
And so, yes, it really does help a little bit at the margin with respect to a lot of residential customers in terms of whether it's solar on your roof or whether it's battery. That really helps. But you still need to have that constant 24/7 power to be able to deal with, the big data centers and the chip manufacturers.
Yeah.
So we're still going to have to build more generation. So, and that deals with the issue in terms of potentially some more natural gas plants, utility solar plants. We're obviously looking in terms of expanding in terms of small modular nuclear reactors. We're also in the process of converting some of our old coal plants to natural gas plants to reduce emissions. So all in anticipation of these really, really big loads that hopefully will continue to come and help grow our community.
Well, I mean, the data centers, they're great for the economy and what's happening in the valley and the growth and the jobs and, of course, our real estate market. Executives are moving here left and right. So it's interesting to see that. Like with nuclear power, for example, how much capacity are they actually using of the capacity available for like Palo Verde?
So, Palo Verde runs all the time. And, generally that's owned by 7 different utilities. APS is the lead utility in terms of Palo Verde. They're the operating agent, and SRP has a share of that as well as some others. And, that's over 2,000 megawatts that Palo Verde itself produces that then is shared among those 7 utilities. So the question would be, what do you do next? Do you expand Palo Verde? Do you build some small modular nuclear reactors or go someplace else? And I think we've announced publicly in terms of us working with some of the other utilities to look at those issues, to bring them online. Part of the challenge is the timeline. They're huge projects. They have to go through quite a bit of review to get permits with respect to that, and they are a tad expensive to build as well.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's also, do you face any political pushback on that? I feel like there's kind of a sentiment out there that nuclear is unsafe, and I feel like that's a bit of a myth.
So there is political pushback with respect to that, and not to date myself, but so I was in college when 3 Mile Island occurred back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And there was a huge great building in the 70s with respect to nuclear plants. That was kind of the big first push.
Yeah.
Then 3 Mile Island happened.
Yeah.
Right? Everything slowed down to nothing.
Yeah.
Started building back up. There were some more plants that were built. And then you had Fukushima occur in Japan.
Yeah.
And you've had a couple just recently start in the South, but there's still a lot of political opposition in terms of, number one, building them plants, and then what to do with the spent fuel.
Yeah.
And so it's been challenged with respect to that. I think people are now starting to understand that really for the future, you need to have some additional power sources.
Yeah.
And nuclear is an option. It's being used around the world.
Yep.
And with the appropriate safeguards, it's a great, great generation facility.
Yeah. So I would like to dig a little into the modular because I think I know enough to be dangerous, but educate me and the audience too. When you say modular, that's...
Sure. So if you think about the nuclear plant, if you think about Palo Verde, you see these gigantic big stacks.
Yep.
Big facilities. And, those are essentially 750 megawatts each. So if you look at Palo Verde, if you're driving along Interstate 10 and you look to the south, you'll kind of see the big stacks.
Yeah.
That's considered kind of your standard traditional, if you will, nuclear facility or plant. And currently a small modular nuclear reactor are much, much smaller, and those are stackable. So in other words, they're only 25 megawatts as opposed to 750. And so you can build them in terms of basically in units of 25.
Yeah.
And so that's the concept with respect to small modular nuclear reactors. You don't spend the billions of dollars that you would have to build in terms of a gigantic nuclear facility.
Yeah. And something like that, like Palo Verde, a full nuclear facility would take 10 plus years to build, right?
Or more.
Yeah. What time frame would a modular, does that drastically reduce or is it?
So a lot depends on what happens at the Department of Energy and also in Washington in terms of how quickly you can actually reform some of the permitting.
Oh, okay.
But it's still a long process, 8 to 10 years.
Okay.
There have been many efforts over the years in terms of permitting reform. How do you get that quicker in terms of the review of all those? It's a big political issue in Washington with respect to that. And there's a lot of people working on it, but it's still a lengthy process to be able to do that.
No.
Strategically, you could place them throughout the valley, have better power distribution if you do the smaller modulars. Right.
Yeah, the challenge with small modulars, not everybody really wants one in their backyard.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about a nuclear facility, you're really talking about something away from population centers. And so they would be pretty far away. They wouldn't put them really close inside the valley. So you'd be looking at sites that are former plants, if you will, but not something that you'd be driving by.
Yeah. We were at that same event in Maui. They were talking about power management, and I could be totally off by saying this, but they had some moonshot idea that they were going to be, their goal is to have it done by in 2028 in Maui, where it's like a mixture of fusion / nuclear. And I know he told everybody in the audience, like, when we get this done, you're all invited back for the grand opening, and it's going to revolutionize how power is created for that island. This is also the guy that, keep in mind, like 2 and 3 years ago, we saw him in New York, and like he gave us his stock picks, which were like NVIDIA. This year he gave us NVIDIA, Planet Labs, and there's one other one that I'm forgetting.
Planeteer, I think was one.
Oh yeah, Palantir.
Palantir,
he told us 3 years ago. So he's a visionary in that, and it's kind of cool. His dedication is they've already acquired the land outside of Maui, and they're building this.
So I'll give him 2 out of 3. I'll give him NVIDIA and I'll give him Planet. I'm not going to give him having a nuclear facility in Hawaii in 2028 or 2029. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I may be misquoted on what he had said, but I have the recording somewhere. I got to go back and listen to it because I'm like, I want to be invited. This sounds exciting.
No, there's a lot of people, and Bill Gates has been fairly involved with respect to this space as well, and a lot of people looking in terms of nuclear. The other interesting thing is going back to the data centers for a moment and the big tech companies. For years and years and years, they were not very interested in terms of having nuclear power associated with their facilities.
Yeah.
The growth that they're having and need for power, they're looking much, much more substantially at that. And you may have read with respect to I don't remember which tech company it was behind actually purchasing the 3 Mile Island site and some of the other locations in terms of potentially restarting some older nuclear reactors, because just the need for power and the timing in which they could potentially get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Makes sense.
Well, yeah. I mean, I live in SRP, so I'm a client, obviously, but it's funny. I just gotten back from Cuba on Saturday, and going through that city and seeing their power grid structure and how bad it is. And I mean, we went into entire cities, and the only 2 hotels that had power on and Wi-Fi were the ones we were staying in, run off of generators essentially. And just looking at that grid, and it's just like, you know, you go into town and it's like the restaurant shut down because they have no power and they don't have a generator. But like, and I think when I'm at home, like my power goes out sometimes during a storm. We have overhead lines and stuff happens, and you guys send me a text and you're like, your power's out. And we estimate it to be back on at 8:07 p.m. And I'm like, how do they do that? Like, how do they know like, exactly what transformer went down and how long it's going to take to replace it? Like, it's pretty incredible. So,
yeah, I think both APS and SRP have done a really, really good job with respect to the reliability of our system. And to some extent, I think people take it for granted.
they do.
They do, and don't realize. And that's one of the reasons, you know, circling back, it's really important to people to watch what's happening in terms of power, electricity going forward, and water. Because we've been fortunate in terms of being able to manage all this. But it is kind of, everyone needs to pay attention and really get involved with respect to understanding how important it is and what you can do kind of moving forward, because it's critically important for life in this valley. Totally important. And it's been really successful, and we want it to continue to be successful.
So what can people do? I mean, obviously there are building regulations changing, low flow, all that stuff. God, one thing that I realized that cut our water bill back by quite a bit was I put in one of those ratio AI watering systems. So like if it rains outside, it won't water my yard. And then it does certain soaking cycles, so you're not using as much water. I mean, that thing paid for itself in like 6 months. I think everybody should have one of those. But that said, what else can people do?
So I think you can go to lots of different websites in terms of how to conserve water without really impacting your daily life is what we really want to do. There's a lot of information on our website, you know, at srpnet.com to go look at in terms of low flow devices, et cetera. So does CAP, Central Arizona Project, and others. With respect to power, there's lots of ability with respect to additional efficiency devices that both APS and SRP use. As I said, I think it's really great for everyone listening in terms of just thoughtful in terms of what can I do, my little bit. Every bit's going to help as we move forward with respect to that.
Great. It's good for them to know.
Yeah.
There's a couple things on the list I definitely want to ask. Well, like, because I remember selling homes in Rio Verde and then having that seller property disclosure statement come over, and they're like, private water. And I'm like, what does that entail exactly? And when they explained it to me that they fill up a truck and drive it 3.5 miles and then fill up a reservoir. And I turned to my client, I'm like, do you think that's a good idea to buy this property? And these are properties they couldn't even put wells on. So what's your experience in that? And how did that pan out? How did that happen? And
so
what are they doing now?
You know, so Rio Verde Foothills, I'll make a couple comments with respect to that. I think number one, obviously, it was a little bit unfortunate in terms of how blown out of proportion it actually was nationally.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a really difficult situation in terms of those people because they were not actually within the city of Scottsdale service area. And so they had a private supply. It wasn't very large of a service territory, the Rio Verde Foot itself, but nonetheless, it got blown out of proportion, particularly on the East Coast with respect to, it wasn't just Rio Verde Foothills, it was Scottsdale was running out of water. It was the state of Arizona running totally blown out of proportion, unfortunately, you know, for a long period of time. Ultimately, however, when we go back to my discussion earlier, it took a little bit of time, but we did get to a solution, you know, with respect to EPCOR and some of the others. So there's water that's available for Rio Verde Foothills, but it was an unfortunate event, I think, for the state because it hit a little black mark when it was unnecessary with respect to that. So I also think that it highlights some of the challenges we have in the state and some loopholes, I would say, that we need to fix going forward. There's obviously some of the subdivision issues that I think need to be addressed at the legislature. Those have come up year to year. The other rent-to-own issues are also coming up that I think are simply going to have to be addressed by the legislature sooner or later, because we've got to really be thoughtful with respect to the water use going forward. Mm-hmm. And we've got to see if we can kind of close some of those things to be able to move forward with respect to that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of those loopholes, like it's my understanding that some of these built-to-rent communities are having to prove a 100-year water supply for one residence, but then they go on and build tens, if not hundreds, of single-family detached apartments. And I mean, that just doesn't seem right.
There's a loophole. People will use it.
Yeah. And I, step back from a policy standpoint, from my view, is we really need to be thoughtful.
Yeah.
From the standpoint, there's a balance between growth today and making sure we still have growth 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the next generation.
Yeah.
And I think those things really need to be thought through from a policy standpoint. How do we close the loopholes that we really think are inconsistent with that balance?
Yeah.
And I think those are some of the things that we're going to have to address, and we need to be really thoughtful with respect to that.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing, people ask about as well is from a national standpoint, in terms of, what are you guys doing with all this growing alfalfa, in terms of some of the farms?
Yeah.
And if I could address that for a moment, in terms of that's also gotten a lot of national news and kind of a little bit of a black eye for the state. And I think that some of the areas, particularly in western Arizona, you have some of the large industrial farming has come in and been referred to some of the Saudi farms where they grow a lot of alfalfa and have been using quite a bit of the aquifer out there, and then shipping that alfalfa over to the Middle East from an economic standpoint. And it's, to be fair, it's just not the Saudi farmers there, but even some of Arizona farmers will do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I think Governor Hobbs obviously has identified that area as now the next active management area. So again, trying to be thoughtful moving forward in terms of balancing growth today versus growth in the future with respect to saving some of those aquifers. Also something kind of watch as we move forward.
I was not aware of that, but I mean, like growing alfalfa here to send to Saudi Arabia, like they can't grow that there, or?
So the area that they were growing was outside the active management area.
Ah, okay.
So in 1980, when one of the big legislation and big victories for the state occurred when they developed the Active Groundwater Management Act, it only included 3 counties of the state. Some of the rural counties did not want to go that way. So some of the areas in La Paz and out there are not in active management areas, and so therefore they're allowed to pump as much water as they use. So there was quite a bit of alfalfa grown out there. That's cut, some Saudi-owned facilities, and they send it over to the Middle East. And so that's something that's being addressed, hopefully, this legislative session. The Department of Water Resources, in terms of the active management area, and the Attorney General also has a lawsuit out there with respect to use of that much water.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so that's also a big national story that's out there that people should be watching for as well in terms of how we deal with that.
So the stance with the governor, SRP, is let's eliminate that and ensure our supply a little bit better?
Yeah, I wouldn't say eliminate it. Obviously from the standpoint, again, it's really...
Manage it a little bit better.
Exactly. It's drawing that appropriate balance in terms of allowing growth today, but not at the expense of growth in the future as well. So it's that balance in terms of where we want to be.
Yeah,
that's the hard thing to strike, right?
It is, but it's important to have those discussions to strike them because, if you think about with, your clients, I mean, their questions really are, how's your water today?
Yeah.
And how's your water going to be in the next generation? I mean, if I were moving from Cook County or from California, I mean, those are the questions I would ask in terms of if I'm investing in this community, how are you doing now? Oh, and how are you going to be in 20 years or 30 years? Are you guys drawing that appropriate balance? And those are the questions I think I would ask, and hopefully you'd have an answer for as my real estate agent.
Yeah.
That's why we have you on today.
We're going to be pulling out a clip and a FAQ and making sure the RETSI agents are fully educated and the real estate enthusiasts. I think you answered like a lot of great questions for this group, and understanding that, even though there are challenges out there, we have supply. and it is a great place to live and a great place to come. And we're doing the right things to try to make the steps so that we have prolonged water for future generations. Anything else you got from Michael while we have him in the hot seat here? Anything else you'd like to cover?
No, the only thing I would circle back is that, so we have some challenges right now in terms of the hydrology and everything else, but I would circle back from the standpoint that this state has always lived up to those challenges and moved forward, with respect to water supplies and accommodating growth and making sure that we're going to thrive in the future. And that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Yep. That's all we can do.
I always remember back, there's this, I think it's up at the Arizona Country Club, but they have the photo of Arcadia when it was just all fields and flooded and irrigation and the Avery orange trees. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And how much water could have been used then. It's like, even though we are irrigating in the neighborhood, a lot of people have pulled off of irrigation. But that said, it's just like looking at the evolution of how much water was used back then versus now. I mean, it's just, we're going to find bigger and better ways to save money and save water and reduce.
Well, so you talked about, at Arizona Country Club in terms of Arcadia. You didn't remember that SRP goes back to 1903, before we were a state. So we have all those records in terms of what the valley looked like even before statehood in terms of what was being used. And it's interesting in terms of watching the evolution in terms of Arcadia and everything else with respect to that and how we've managed those water supplies and growth.
Yeah. Wow.
That's wild. I didn't know that SRP predated Arizona.
Yes.
That's wild.
All right, then I got a question. Papago Park used to be a prisoner of war camp, right? And there used to be a river that ran through it. Or was there?
So just north of McDowell Road off 64th Street and Galvin Parkway.
Yep.
There was, in World War II, there was a German or primitive war camp that was there.
Prisoner of war, yeah.
And the prisoners of war actually were looking at a map and saw that there was a river that ran through the area just south of them. And so there actually was a quote-unquote prison break. And they went down and they actually thought they could hop on the Salt River and eventually work their way down to Mexico. And so what they didn't realize, however, is that didn't always be water in the river. And so they were all caught, I think, because we have records of it because it's just north of SRP. I think they were all caught within 4 or 5 days in the community. But you are correct in terms of down near Papago Park, just north of, as I said, just north of McDowell Road and just west of 64th Street.
Yeah. So this story, where this stems back from.
Are you talking about the Campbell Avery building?
Yeah. We have a building on 32nd Street and in between Campbell and Indian School. And it's an old adobe. It's very original. And then there's these two random huts in the back. And my business partner and I were like, it'd be better to have more parking. Let's just tear these things down. And a historian found out and showed up. And they're like, we have aerials of these were guards towers from Papago's prisoner camp. And they knew exactly when they disappeared off the aerial photos and landed on our lots within the aerial photos. And they're like, we'll pay to relocate it. And that's when my buddy Terrence and I are like, okay, now that we know the history on them, let's just keep them. And they're cool. So. Yeah. So we started doing more research on that and researched that story, and I thought it was pretty neat.
No,
so it's
all true. Yeah, absolutely all true.
Yeah. I'm going to text Terrence when we get out of here and be like, I verified. Yeah. Well, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to come in and chat with us. I mean, water is definitely a topic that comes up in conversation for pretty much everybody moving to Arizona. And I think we addressed a lot of the key points that the agents need to hear and the listeners need to hear.
Oh, good. Yeah. I'm glad it was helpful.
Yeah. And you had mentioned sharing your email address. Are you okay doing that if people wanted to reach out to you?
Happy to. It's michael.o'connor, OCONNOR, at srpnet.com.
Well, hopefully you don't regret that after getting a bunch of emails from agents and stuff, but we greatly appreciate your time and sharing all your insights today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed the conversation.
Me too.
Michael.
Thank you.
That wraps up this week's episode of the WWII podcast. Thanks for listening. Check out the show notes to connect with Michael. If you enjoyed today's episode, take a moment to leave us a review wherever you listen to this podcast. And please subscribe so you never miss what's next. Next week, Chris and Matt are sitting down with RETC agent Heather Wilson. Here's a sneak preview.
You have to be somebody who can smell the market. I mean, you can stick your finger out and like test the wind and you're like, oh, this is 2018, you know? And that's a really amazing thing about the resale market is I don't think the cycles are the same, but there's something familiar, right? In each cycle where you go, oh, been here before.